That's David Condon, who is he's been making windows that I've been designing for about 15 years. These were ceramic ornaments I designed for the White House Christmas trees, and they were made on an Indian reservation in the state of Oregon. And the colors were chosen to work with the drapes in the state dining room. So this is one of these planter boxes that I made, again, trying to use as many people as possible. The planter boxes I designed were made out of wood, and they were made by two Irish carpenters. And Mary, my friend Mary, who's sitting right there, said, let me make something for you in needlepoint. And so when I thought, I want to make something that maybe Barack Obama will keep, that it won't just be put away as Christmas. So I thought the national bird is the bald eagle, and the eagle is associated with all things with imagery of government, but also a lot of decoration in folk and craft world. And so I came up with this eagle, and the background is red, white, green, and navy blue, so that it could work for Christmas and beyond. And so Mary took my design, sent it to a company that converted it into a pattern for needlepoint. She spent 6 months making this. She called me up and she said, Dave, there's no one in Cincinnati to make the pillow. It won't be done in time. So I called my friend who's a Sicilian immigrant. She said, I can block it. And then she gave it to her Romanian husband, who was a janitor in Chicago. I picked it up from him, and then I took it to my sister, who made it into a pillow. So that's the story of the pillow for the White House.
David, you gave me 6 weeks to do it.
No, you had more. Well, whatever it was, she did an amazing job. Sorry. Well, we found out about the project in July. So, yeah. But you sent it to me around Thanksgiving time. We'll leave it there.
Okay.
So here it is on the president's bench in the White House. It's a beautiful piece. Didn't Mary do an amazing job? And it was like in the state dining room, trying to figure out where it was going to go. And there were all these marvelous volunteers, but some of them were not very bright, who kept wanting to get rid of it. I kept saying, no, that's the president's pillow. It's supposed to stay here until the right person from the administration places where it's going to go in the White House. So working in the White House at Christmas, you would think would be the most wonderful, peaceful, delightful thing. It was kind of like being on a reality show. You constantly had to be proving your worth and why you needed to stay. So these were trees that I designed that were based on different ethnic groups. So it was inspired by Swedish design, lots of hearts, and you can see the Washington Monument in the background. We made 2 of these. They're 15 feet tall, and they were in the First Lady's garden. And I just thought they turned out fantastic. And one of the first places I started working in churches were for African American churches on the south side of Chicago. This was the 3rd church I worked for, St. Columbanus, and this was actually a design that was rejected by another church on the north side of Chicago, St. Alphonsus. And I just thought it was a wonderful design. And so then when I got the call from a young priest who said, we want you to come up with something to sort of brand and give a visual look to our church, which had been, St. Columbanus was an Irish neighborhood, and then it became African American eventually. And so I had this design, and I used shades of brown for the face of St. Columbanus. Recently, they have renamed the church to St. Moses the Black. A lot of churches that I work for on the south side are being renamed right now. And thankfully, they're hiring me again to continue the visual legacy. So, St. Joan of Arc, I feel like we've been all living in a really dark time, and the body of black and white saints was about 50 images that I made over almost 10 years. And then I just sort of stopped. They were popular, They helped me raise a down payment for the house that I bought. They've been shown all over the country. They've been in a lot of Catholic universities. Loyola has a whole collection. DePaul University has a collection. They were shown at the Jesuit school in New Orleans. They've been all over the place. But then a friend of mine got a job as a docent at Luma, which was Loyola's art museum, and they were having a show about new images of Joan of Arc. And that made me think, well, maybe it's time to revisit the saints, but approach it in a different way. And I just thought that we needed strong, happy images. And so this sort of led me to what you have now hanging in the Mother House. So I take inspiration from all kinds of things. I'm constantly looking for visual information and visual research. So the show that I had at Luma was at Christmas time, and so St. Nicholas is associated with Christmas. So I looked up butter molds from Holland, and so this was a butter mold that I just loved. And it's either they're butter molds or cookie molds, but it was carved out of wood, and I just loved it. So that became this. So this was my St. Nicholas. And I had the idea that these would be cut out of corrugated cardboard. So I found a printer who had a laser cutter that would print on really thick cardboard, and then it could be cut out. And I kept thinking that it'd be a cool show someday to show a history of saints in advertising. Because you see them on wine bottles, beer bottles, the nuns make wine, the monks make wine, the nuns make wine. There's all these products that are associated with food items that come with monasteries and convents that I thought it would be marvelous to show this whole sort of legacy and history of it. And I like the idea of this sort of being a cutout that you might see at a grocery store at Christmas time as a decoration. And today is St. Patrick's Day, but it's also St. Gertrude's Day. And she is known as the patron saint of cats. I just was reading about her this morning that she was an abbess who ran an inn, and there were always problems with mice. And so she just got a bunch of cats to take care of the mice. And so she's invoked as a patroness who will help you get rid of rodents and mice and rats. But apparently, I read this great story today that followers or friends of hers were on a voyage in the sea. She's from Belgium, and a sea monster showed up and terrified the sailors, but they said her name over and over again, and the sea monster disappeared, which turned into a tradition of drinking the beverage during rough seas. So it's interesting how everything kind of ties together. I also learned today that there was a tradition in Ireland that you put a shamrock, which Patrick used to convert the Irish to Christianity by using the shamrock as a symbol of the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. But there's this tradition that you take a shamrock, you put it in a whiskey glass, you pour Irish whiskey, you toast to St. Patrick and to your health, and you drink it. You either swallow it, or you throw it over your shoulder for good luck. So, everybody should do that tonight. I'm also really interested in early images of Catholicism and Christianity. So this is this is a Coptic church in Ethiopia, and they have these beautiful illuminated manuscripts. This is one of them, and just looking at the patterns and the designs was really exciting to me, and it became the basis for this image of Saint Benedict the African. So this sort of image that I use over and over again of hands up, sort of as welcome or as a way of praying, is something that I constantly go back to. So when I was having the show at Loyola Art Museum, they showed me this medieval window of St. Barbara and the dragon, and said, this is one of our great treasures, would you interpret this? So looking at the window, it turned into this. And a friend of mine who was a medieval historian said that what happened was that the dragon swallowed Margaret, but she was such fierce spirituality that she crawled out of his stomach and he died. And so mine is a little happier. And so when my friend said, well, what do you think about that story and your image? I said, I see it as this was the school play, and someone was playing the dragon and someone was playing St. Margaret, and they're all taking their bow. And here's my image of St. Francis of Assisi with the birds. And there's a chapel at the bottom that represents the church that was in ruins that he rebuilt by hand. That he had this vision that God told him to rebuild the church, and he saw this broken down church, but God really meant, according to the story, the church as a whole. The church has become too decadent and too rich and too powerful. And so that set him on his journey to this very simple, humble way of life. This is St. Peter, and I had this idea. I was just doodling on the back of an old envelope of the shape of the boat, and my work is really about shape and color and patterns, but just sort of always trying to be sometimes playful. And so I had the idea of just putting I looked for visual symbols. So he's holding the keys to heaven. He's the keeper of the keys. He's in a boat. He was a fisherman. There is a little chapel on the boat. His pants have fish on them. He's wearing a French seaman's striped sweater. He's considered to be the first bishop of the church. He's wearing the mitre, and then he's holding the rooster as the symbol of when he betrayed Christ 3 times when the rooster crowed. So everything is hopefully filled with accessible, easy to understand symbols. So here it is my cutout of St. Christopher as the patron saint of lifeguards. He's happy in this version. Baby Jesus is really happy, and so he's holding this staff, this tree branch that helps him steady his way through the water. But Jesus told him to plant that and it would turn into a tree. And another version of the story is that he sat under the tree and told the story of his encounter with Christ over and over and over again. This is a Mexican sister who is one of the great writers of the church, and I was in Pueblo in Mexico, and the convent that she was at was having a big anniversary, either her life or her feast day or something like that. Whenever she's depicted, she always has this giant medallion of the Madonna under her chin. So I was trying to be accurate to these old, amazing engravings of her. There's also this great, it's called the Cusco School, or in Mexico, it's Baroque imagery from the Baroque period of a lot of images of nuns wearing habits, but also decorated with lots of flowers. So I was trying to celebrate that and make it festive. This was one of the ones that the sisters commissioned of St. Aloysius Gonzaga. And I also did one that's not shown here, but it was St. Arnold, who was the patron saint of beer makers. And he came up with one of the first taglines. So he lived during one of the many plagues that attacked and went through Europe. But he had a saying, don't drink water, because the plague was spread through bad water. To drink beer instead, which I thought was an advertising pitch for drinking beer. So I put on his cassock, don't drink water, drink beer. And he's holding a big stein of beer, and everyone fell in love with that image. But I thought a lot of people don't know who Aloysius Gonzaga was, and he died very young, taking care of plague victims. And he's also known as the patron saint of caregivers for people with AIDS as well. Mary's mother, St. Anne, was one of the requests that I make. And so I really like to put a lot of thought into what I'm doing. So Mary is holding the Sacred Heart of Jesus, but her mother is holding the Sacred Heart of Mary, which usually is a heart with roses on it. So again, the symbolism, if you understand it, it's there to keep the story going, or to keep the dialogue going. And Saint Elizabeth of Hungary was a queen of Hungary, and she was one of the marvelous people who really took care of the poor and delivered baskets of bread to those in need. And she's also shown with lots of roses. So I put the roses in there. And these are French baguettes, because it's hard to draw a loaf of bread. And Saint Joseph, the stepfather of Jesus, the carpenter. An interesting story. I wound up doing a project for the Archdiocese of Chicago for their 150th anniversary. A bunch of artists and photographers donated all of their works, and they made a beautiful book that was passed out in the Tribune celebrating the 150th anniversary of the Archdiocese of Chicago, but it was modeled on, there was a couple of books that came out like 25 years ago, A Day in the Life of Australia, A Day in the Life of Great Britain, where photographers just showed a whole country. And so modeled on that concept, they wanted to show that the Archdiocese was more than a church, it was more than a school, it was hospitals, it was nursing homes, it was sports programs. It showed the big range of activities that the church was part of. And so, because I've been doing these black and white saints, someone said, you should show them your work, they can use it to mix in with the photography. So I took my work, and the art director got really excited, and I said, instead of just being black and white saints, I think I should make something that looks like stained glass windows, which then suggested that I could design stained glass windows, which led to me having a career of designing stained glass windows for chapels and churches and hospitals. And so what I'm trying to tell you is that I got to meet Cardinal Benedict, and he had seen the black and white saints and said, I wish you would do an image of Saint Joseph, but he's always shown as an old man. I want you to show him young. So I drew an image of a young carpenter who's bare-chested, who has a heart made of leaves, suggesting that the love he had in his heart was ever growing, and he could deal with the challenges of finding out that his wife was pregnant by God, and then raising the Christ child. And so I gave it to Cardinal Benedict, and he loved it. He really loved it. And then he gave it, then when he died, it was given to a woman who said, I don't really like this one, can I trade it in for something else? So this is my image of Mary, the Blessed Mother. There are many versions of Mary. Every country has an Our Lady of a country. I just made one, an image based on this image, but with the colors of the Ukrainian flag and sunflowers. And so I'm going to make prints. I'm going to make like 200 prints and sell them for $100 a piece, and then I'm going to give $75 to whatever I find is the clearest path to get the money to people in need in the Ukraine. But this was a lovely project to work on. Again, it's inspired by my affection for folk art and crafts. There's a wonderful International Folk Art Museum in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and a lot of the imagery is from Mexico. And I was just struck by how often from poor communities, people are making something beautiful. And there are these wonderful, heartfelt, do-it-yourself, kind of wonderfully drawn images. And so a lot of that sort of comes into my sensibility. St. Vincent de Paul was an important character in the history of France. I believe it's either during the Revolution or after the Revolution. People were so poor, they were abandoning their children, and so he and a wealthy woman would gather the children, and because this woman was wealthy, they took care of the children and created an orphanage. So those are 2 children that he's found. So I was thinking that this would make a really nice biscuit tin for if there was St. Vincent de Paul biscuits. And this is the patron saint of this order, and it's been changing as I've been working on it. Recently, when I made the first image, she was holding a cross and a heart, and then Judy said, oh, it should be a pair. You should have a pair because she grew pears and apples and distributed them to the poor. And then at the last minute, Judy said, could you draw the chapel from Fort Wayne, a representation of that? So I have her holding it because I wanted to show her strength as a strong woman, and that it's her strength and her faith that created this wonderful order. And today is St. Patrick's Day, so here's an image of St. Patrick, much happier, a really happy one. It's unlike the one you saw earlier that was black and white. And so behind him is a rainbow, because if you follow a leprechaun and you get the pot of gold, there's a rainbow. So this ties back to Father Campagna. So 25 years ago, my mother called me up and said, Boys Town is celebrating its 50th anniversary and renaming it Campagna Academy after its founder, Father Campagna. And you need to enter this contest and do something nice to honor Father Campagna. And my mother, as a teenager growing up down the street from Immaculate Conception, he would gather the teenage girls and take them to Boys Town in Cherville, Indiana, about 25 miles west of here. And what happened was he was inspired by Father Flanagan's Boys Town in Nebraska. He bought a plot of land, built these cabins for boys at risk in society or in a bad situation at home, and the boys could work on their problems and hopefully re-enter the world a stronger boy. And there's this story that he found a rose growing in the alley that was suffering. And so he dug it and gave it some care, and it bloomed into a beautiful plant. And that's how we saw helping these boys, that if the boys were given love and care and respect, they could become strong and beautiful like the rose. So I invented a saying about him that was, with love and care, I can grow and I can change the world and my world. So the boy is being handed a heart by Father Campagna, but he's holding the earth in his hands because the world is up and waiting for him. So I made this. It was one of the first windows that I designed 25 years ago. And about 3 weeks ago, I called them up and I said, I just saw on their website that you're celebrating your 75th anniversary. I'm the one who did the window that's in the main meeting hall. And they said, oh, can you make another one for the 75th anniversary? I said, well, I was thinking maybe a t-shirt, something small, something modest that I would donate my time on. And I was talking to a benefactor and patron of mine, Peter Naw, who said, my mother was really good friends with Father Campagna. You go to them, where I'm going today at 2 o'clock, and tell them I'll pay for another window or a mosaic or whatever. So we all walk away from home and we all eventually come home. So this is sort of my path of making art, and sometimes I make images of saints. So thank you for listening to me and looking at my work.
Can you take some questions, David? If anybody has questions that they'd like to ask about the artwork?
David, could you explain to us, especially with your saints, your process